For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. A while ago, and I mean a really long time ago, as in one of the first history videos I ever made right when the world shut down, I talked about this band right here, U2, and their connection to the National Football League, although not in the way that you might expect. Today, when you think of U2 and the NFL, you either think of their performance in 2006 at the Superdome with Green Day to reopen up the venue after Hurricane Katrina on Monday Night Football, or you think of their performance in 2002 at the Superdome at Super Bowl 36 for the halftime show of the game, where Bono and company put on arguably the greatest halftime show in sports history, with the iconic image of Bono unveiling an American flag from his jacket during a moving performance of Where the Streets Have No Name, where the victims of the terrorist attacks on September 11th were scrolling up on a sheet behind the band. However, back in 1992, U2 single-handedly caused a game between the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins to get postponed, forcing both teams to take a Week 1 bye. You can learn more about that controversy by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, to make a long story short, because there was a hurricane down in Miami, the NFL wanted to move the Dolphins-Patriots game in Week 1 up to Foxborough and just have the two teams swap dates, since they played each other twice. However, because U2 was playing a concert in Foxborough around the same time, and the field wouldn't be in game shape or ready whatsoever, this was not possible. By forcing the Patriots and the Dolphins to take a Week 1 bye, both teams got screwed over. And speaking of U2 can become a part of this channel that talks about the history of the NFL all the time by liking this post, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. We post every single day about the weird and wacky history of the NFL, so if you like that sort of stuff, then this is the place for you. So join the community today and help us get to 60,000 subscribers. Thanks in advance for your support. However, it might surprise you to find out that this was not the only time in the 1990s that U2 screwed over an NFL team and derailed their chances at success. If I had a nickel for every time that U2 was involved in some sort of controversy with an NFL team because of a massive venue conflict on the eve of a big game, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. Because 5 years later, in 1997, it happened again, where the Detroit Lions got screwed over prior to a game against the Green Bay Packers. All because of this band right here, U2. In 1997, U2 was in the middle of their heavily divisive and somewhat disappointing from a ticket sales standpoint, Pop Mart tour, used to promote their latest album, Pop. The tour was riddled with controversies, from low ticket sales in many cities like Jacksonville, where only 25% of Alltel Stadium was full, to technical errors, to a whole bunch of other things, including mixed reception to the album itself. But perhaps no controversy was as weird as what transpired right around Halloween of 1997, when through mysterious ways, the Lions got screwed over by one of the biggest bands of all time. Because in the name of love, this is the story behind the bizarre drama and the feud between U2 and the Detroit Lions. Before I talk about the actual controversy in question, we need some context to understand the importance of this game right here, and what the original game plan was. It's Week 10 of the NFL season, and we're supposed to have a big game on our hands in Sunday Night Football at Lambeau Field between these two teams right here, the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. For the Lions, this game was absolutely massive for a few reasons. Number one, it was a game against their biggest rival, as the Lions hate no team more strongly and more passionately than they hate the Packers. Anytime you can play a rivalry game, especially a game like this where you got swept the previous year and hadn't won at Green Bay Stadium since 1991, it's a pretty big deal. Number two, this was a Sunday Night Football game on ESPN, so this was in prime time under the lights in front of a national television audience, always raising the stakes. But number three, and most importantly, the NFC was an absolute logjam when it came to the playoff picture. The Lions enter this one at the halfway point with a 4-4 record, 2 games back of the Packers and the Vikings for the division lead. So a loss here would just about end their chances at winning the NFC Central. A loss would also be detrimental to their playoff chances, as even though the Lions were tied for the number 6 seed right now at 4-4, they were tied with 4 other teams, as nothing was separating Washington, Philadelphia, Dallas, Detroit, and Carolina from each other at the moment. Win this game, and you put yourself in the driver's seat for a playoff spot, and maybe even a division title. Lose this game, and you've definitely got some work to do. So, how do you beat the Packers? How do you beat arguably the best team in the NFC right now, and maybe even the NFL right now, and the team that won the Super Bowl last season and has shown no signs of slowing down? How do you beat a team that's just a few days removed from beating the defending AFC champion New England Patriots on Monday Night Football, in a game that you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner? Well, there's quite a few ways to do it, but it all starts in practice. That's where you figure out your plan and where you get your execution in order, out on the practice field. We see teams harp on getting in a good practice and the importance of having a good week of practice all the time, and to beat the Packers would be no exception. However, as you can probably guess, that did not happen. Because why are we talking about practice? Why are we sitting here talking about a Sunday Night Football game between two bitter rivals that has massive playoff implications, and we're talking about practice? Well, that's because things did not exactly go according to plan. You see, when the Lions started their work week against the Packers, the original plan was to practice outdoors on their outdoor practice field, as they always did. The Lions did not have an indoor practice field of their own at the time, and while that would become a thing once the Lions built their brand new venue with Ford Field a few years later, at this present moment in 1997, the Lions had no indoor field. And this was a problem because, well, it was raining pretty hard. Now you might ask yourself, what's the problem with rain? Football is played in the rain, and football teams practice in the rain all the time, especially because there was no thunder or lightning in the area. Well, the conditions of this field were not good, because there was so much rain both now and over the weekend that the field was completely waterlogged. It was a safety issue, and it wouldn't even be conducive to practice, because you'd just be running in a pool. So the Lions would have to move indoors. If they were going to get a practice session in before their big duel against the Packers, they would have to find an indoor venue. And usually, when this problem came up, they would just practice inside their actual stadium, as in the Pontiac Silverdome. And 99.9% of the time, they'd be able to do that without any issue. Just move practice indoors to the stadium and go from there, with no harm done and with no real difference. Except that this was the 0.1% of the time that they couldn't do that. Because while the Lions couldn't practice on their outdoor field because it was waterlogged and because of the inclement weather, they also couldn't practice on their indoor field at the Silverdome because, as you might have been able to guess, U2 was playing. U2 was going to play in front of 36,000 fans at the Silverdome on Halloween, with Smash Mouth as the opening act. And yes, you heard that right, there was a concert with U2 and Smash Mouth in 1997, and it did not even come close to selling out somehow. I have never been more disappointed with America than that statement right there. Having said that, the Pop Mart Tour was a massive tour with a massive stage, with the arch of the stage being a whopping 98 feet high. With how massive the stage was, it took an awfully long time to put the stage together. This was not one of those stages that you assemble the day of the show and disassemble that night. If U2 was coming to your city, you needed to book that venue for a week to deal with the construction and deconstruction of the stage. So even though U2 was only playing on Halloween, and this practice was set to take place a few days before, the Silverdome was already booked, as it was starting to get into U2 configuration. Plus, even if it didn't necessarily take that long, good luck getting the Pontiac Stadium Authority to bend over backwards to help out the Lions with the Silverdome, especially when they already announced that they were leaving the city to go to downtown Detroit and build a brand new venue. You want our help when you're going to abandon us? Tough luck. Figure it out. Good luck with that. Which raises the question for the Lions entering this game right here. You can't practice outdoors because your field is completely waterlogged. And you can't practice indoors because your stadium is being used for a massive U2 concert. So how are you supposed to practice to beat the Packers? Well, you don't. I shouldn't say that because the Lions, bless their hearts, tried their absolute best to practice despite the conditions. However, in all honesty, the playground that you played football on at recess in elementary school was better than whatever the heck the Lions were forced to do here. The Lions practiced indoors in a shed attached to the Silverdome. Seriously, they practiced inside a shed. Think of your typical storage facility, and that's what the Lions were working with here. You think they had 100 yards of field to work with? Or technically 120 yards because of the end zones? Try a quarter of that. They had a 30-yard strip of turf. Not 30 yards completely covered. One singular strip of turf that was 30 yards. That was it. Considering the fact that this was a storage shed, they couldn't practice special teams. You couldn't pump the ball or kick the ball off on kickoffs or field goals because the ceiling was so low. So any special teams work was out the door. You couldn't really practice offense because you couldn't go deep, since any throw by a quarterback would hit the ceiling. Seriously, the ceilings were about the height of your apartment room. Good luck with that. And the shed was so small that the team couldn't even fit in the shed all at once. The team had to do their practice session alternating position by position. It was that bad. This was quite possibly the worst place to practice football. It's the equivalent of having to practice for a basketball game on an ice rink with no hoop. Honestly, the only thing worse would be if the only facility the Lions could find for this game right here was a field filled with Legos. That's how non-conducive this was to having a good practice. The Lions were completely and utterly screwed. And as you can probably expect, considering the importance of this game right here, and considering how awful this entire situation was, especially since the Lions didn't want to bust somewhere like Ann Arbor to practice, because it would take too long and would mean even less time to watch film, head coach Bobby Ross was furious about this, and was terrified. You're telling me I've got to play the best team in football, the defending champion, and I can't even practice aside from a shed with a 10-foot roof where I can't do anything? Yeah, that's not good. Said Ross, we had to come in here, which you can well see is not a coliseum by any stretch of the imagination. We need to work on the long ball, regardless of whether it's the Packers or whoever. We need long ball work every day we can get it. We never want to miss it. The only way you could do it would be to clear the building and let the wide receivers work one-on-one against the secondary. And then, you can't run deep patterns. That's a major problem right now. I'm not going to comment on it, but it's disturbing to be very honest with you. Sounds like you just commented on that, Coach Ross. Sounds like you literally just commented on that, but that's beside the point. Bottom line, thanks to you two, the Lions were screwed. Is it getting better? No, it's actually getting worse. And as you could probably tell from all of this footage from the game, yes, this ended up making a pretty significant impact. Who knew that being unable to practice would hurt your chances of winning? Because when all was said and done, the Lions got smoked, losing to the Packers in front of a national television audience by a final score of 20-10. Lions quarterback Scott Mitchell, who again, couldn't really practice that week because he couldn't throw anything deep because the ceilings were too low, went 21 for 47, completing just 44% of his passes for 158 yards, 131 net passing yards, or an abysmal 2.5 net yards per pass attempt, while getting sacked 4 times, throwing no touchdowns, throwing 4 interceptions, including a pick 6, and posting a passer rating of 17.9, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. Third down offense? It was non-existent. The Lions went just 2 for 17 on third down, converting just 11% of the time over there. The Lions played 8 road games in 1997 in the regular season, and here's a chart of every single one of them organized by their net passing yards. See that bar way at the bottom with no other game in the same stratosphere? Yeah, that's their game against the Packers, where they couldn't practice throwing the ball more than 5 yards down the field, because anything longer and the ball would hit the ceiling, because they were practicing in the shed due to the U2 concert. I don't think that's a coincidence. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that there's some correlation there. Either way, everything about this loss for the Lions as they dropped to 4-5 was ugly with a capital U, or should I say, a capital U2. As for what happened after the game between these two teams behind me right here, the Detroit Lions would rebound following that loss to the Packers. Even though they lost to Washington the following week to drop to 4-6, the Lions would end the season by winning 5 of their final 6 games, in a very similar run to what they went on in 1995 over the second half of the season, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. The Lions would end the season at 9-7 and would make the playoffs before falling to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the wild card round. Oh, and as for U2, this would be the last time that they would ever play at the Silverdome, and would be the last time they ever played at a Lions venue until 2017, when they played at Ford Field nearly 20 years later. This was U2's third concert at the Silverdome, and considering all the circumstances involved with it, the third time was most definitely not the charm. Practice is really important. We all know that, and we all know the value there is in having good practices to get ready for a game, especially against a rival on the road who happens to be one of the best teams in football. So when a team is unable to practice because their stadium is being overtaken by one of the biggest fans in the world, that's kind of a problem. And it highlighted just one of the many, and I truly mean many, issues that the Lions had in their near quarter-century history playing at the Silverdome. Because in 1997, when it came to getting a good practice in against the Packers, the Lions hadn't found what they were looking for. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.